An internet urban myth, or creepypasta, is a piece of horror folklore born online, designed to blur the line between fiction and something that might actually be real. Today I'm breaking down every major one, starting with the story that quietly invented the entire genre. Ted the Caver. In December 2000, a guy named Ted started documenting a cave near his home on a personal website. No YouTube, no Reddit, just one guy and a webpage. But here's the thing, the horror wasn't monsters or gore. It was narrowing passages, strange markings on the walls, and a creeping sense that something down there was fundamentally wrong. Then Ted's website vanished. Nobody ever confirmed who he was. Nobody found the cave. The man in the evidence just disappeared, which accidentally made the whole thing 10 times more unsettling. One anonymous guy with a basic website wrote the template for every internet horror story that followed by simply never finishing. But if Ted the Caver unsettles you with what it doesn't show, the next one is going to disturb you with what it absolutely does. Squidward's suicide. SpongeBob SquarePants is designed to feel safe. That's the whole point. It's bright colors, silly jokes, and a sponge who's way too happy about his minimum wage job. So when a creepypasta showed up claiming that a lost episode existed where Squidward kills himself on screen, with footage of a dead child spliced into the animation, it hit different than any horror story could on its own. The narrator claimed to be an unpaid animation intern at Nickelodeon in 2005 who stumbled across the episode in the studio archives. But here's what made it brilliant. The story never explains why the episode exists. No rogue animator, no cursed tape, no corporate conspiracy. It just ends. And that absence of explanation is exactly what made it terrifying. Nobody has ever found a screenshot, a file, or a single frame of corroborating evidence. But the story didn't need proof because it invented a formula. Take something your audience loved as a kid, fill it with imagery that violates everything that show represents, and let their brain do the rest. That trick, weaponizing childhood nostalgia through horror, became the single most replicated template in creepypasta history. But if Squidward's suicide corrupted something you watch, the next entry corrupted something far worse, what you see standing at the foot of your bed. The Rake. Here's where it gets weird because the Rake shouldn't exist, not in the way it does now. The creature started as nothing more than an anonymous 4chan post in 2005, literally just a thread asking people to brainstorm new monster ideas. That's it, a forum prompt. But something awful user Brian Somerville took that brainstorm and formalized it into a full narrative on July 20th, 2006, and the internet ran with it. The creature itself was described as a pale, thin, naked humanoid, somewhere between a person and a large hairless dog, with white eyes and long claws that looked like garden rakes. But the claws weren't what made it terrifying. Unlike most monsters that just attack on sight, the Rake stalked its victims for weeks, sometimes months, learning their routines, memorizing their family members, watching them sleep. The slow surveillance was the horror. And here's the part that makes the Rake genuinely unique in creepypasta history. Nobody owns it. No single authoritative version exists. The creature evolved entirely through community-written stories, fan art, and iterative mythology building with zero central author controlling the canon. It even crossed over into the YouTube series Everyman Hybrid, proving that a monster born from a casual brainstorm thread could migrate into full collaborative horror universes. The Rake is the internet's first truly crowdsourced monster. But if you think a creature designed by committee is unsettling, wait until you see what a single cursed image can do to someone. Smile Dog. The image is exactly what it sounds like, and somehow worse. A Siberian husky with human teeth stretched into a grin that shouldn't exist, and lurking in the background, a hand reaching out from pure darkness. The creepypasta claimed that just viewing the image would trigger nightmares featuring the dog's face, an unshakable compulsion to forward it to someone else within 24 hours, and if you resisted, chronic insomnia, followed by death. But here's where it gets interesting. In 2023, the actual creator came forward. A college student named Michael J. Lutz revealed he'd made the original image in September 2008 using Photoshop's smudge tool and low opacity brush overlays on a real husky photograph. He still had photographic proof of the original college-hosted post, confirmed the red variant was the true smile.jpg, and essentially pulled back the curtain on one of the internet's most mythologized cursed images. A kid with Photoshop accidentally built a legend that terrified people for over a decade, and the story's fictional victim, Mary E., claims she never felt compelled to spread it despite 15 years of nighttime seizures. Others who saw it either vanished from the internet or died. No verified escape from the curse existed in the narrative, which made it feel airtight. But now we know the truth was a college dorm and a smudge tool. If you think a cursed photo is unsettling, wait until you hear about a children's TV show that never existed, yet dozens of people swear they watched it. Candle Cove. Most creepypastas are written by anonymous users who vanish into the internet and never take credit. Candle Cove is the opposite. It was written by Chris Straub, published on his website icherfalls.com on March 15, 2009, under a Creative Commons license. A creepypasta with an actual author, an actual date, and actual literary craft. It's the one your English teacher would assign if they knew what creepypasta was, but here's what made it genuinely innovative. The story wasn't written as a first-person account or a found document. It was formatted as a forum thread, where adults from the same region nostalgically recalled a children's TV show called Candle Cove that supposedly aired on Channel 58 in the early 1970s. The memories start innocent enough, the way anyone would reminisce about old cartoons, but then someone mentions a puppet character called the Skin Taker, a skeletal figure that had zero business appearing on a children's program, and the entire tone shifts. Straub confirmed his inspiration was a satirical Onion article about a man still having nightmares from a 1970s kids show called Lidsville. The premise was never about a real show. It was about the horror that hides inside a nostalgic memory, the idea that something you loved as a child might have been deeply wrong the entire time. And in 2016, Sci-Fi adapted it into the first season of their anthology series Channel Zero, making Candle Cove one of the earliest creepypastas to jump from internet fiction to mainstream television. But if a well-crafted short story could become that influential, imagine what happened when someone created a monster using nothing but 2 photoshopped images. Slender Man. 2 photos. That's all it took to create the most famous monster the internet has ever produced. On June 10, 2009, a Something Awful forum user named Eric Knudsen, posting under the name Victor Surge, entered a Photoshop contest. The challenge was simple: create convincing paranormal images. Knudsen submitted 2 black and white photos of children playing, digitally altered to include a tall, thin figure in a black suit with a featureless white face and tentacle-like appendages stretching from its back. The captions mentioned missing children. That was it, but here's where it gets crazy. Unlike every other creepypasta we've talked about, the image came first. There was no story, no lore, no rules, just 2 doctored photos and a name. And the internet did the rest. Within months, thousands of people were building this creature's mythology from scratch. Memory erasure, dimensional rifts, psychological manipulation, child abductions. None of it came from Knudsen. All of it came from random forum users riffing on each other's ideas with total sincerity. The original post is still archived and readable, which makes the scale of what followed feel almost absurd. 2 photos spawned films, video games, merchandise, and real-world events that made international news. Slender Man didn't just become a creepypasta. He became proof that the internet could build a god out of nothing. But if a fictional monster can bleed into reality, imagine what happens when a real video game gets blamed for killing children. Lavender Town Syndrome. This is creepypasta engineering at its absolute finest. Pokemon Red and Green launched in Japan on February 27, 1996, and that date is real. Lavender Town is a real location in the game. And the background music that plays there is genuinely one of the creepiest tracks in gaming history. But here's where someone took all of that and built a myth so airtight it still circulates today. The story claimed that shortly after launch, a wave of suicides and illnesses swept through Japanese children between the ages of 7 and 12, specifically targeting kids who had reached Lavender Town. The alleged cause? Extremely high frequencies embedded in the original theme music, frequencies only developing ears could detect. The creepypasta reported at least 200 children dead. And the genius part is the cover-up framing. The story claimed Nintendo quietly acknowledged the problem and lowered the frequencies in later versions of the game. So when you go looking for evidence and find nothing, the narrative already has an answer. Of course there's nothing. They buried it. No Japanese public health records, no Nintendo documentation, no news reports from 1996 have ever confirmed a single detail. But that's exactly why it works. The absence of evidence becomes the evidence. You can't fully disprove a cover-up, and the creepypasta's author knew that from the start. But if you think a fake corporate conspiracy is unsettling, wait until you hear about a very real experiment that never happened inside a Soviet research facility, the Russian sleep experiment. On August 10th, 2010, a user named Orange Soda posted a story to the Creepypasta wiki that would become one of the most shared horror stories on the entire internet. And nobody knows who they actually are. The premise was simple but brutal. Soviet researchers in the late 1940s sealed 5 political prisoners inside a chamber and pumped in an experimental gas stimulant designed to keep them awake for 15 days straight. They monitored everything through observation windows, and for a while, it worked. But then, the subjects started changing. The story escalated from psychological deterioration into full-body horror, with the prisoners mutilating themselves, tearing out their own organs, and becoming so violent that guards had their throats ripped open trying to intervene. Soldiers who witnessed the aftermath committed suicide. The narrator somehow survived the entire ordeal with zero explanation, and that wasn't a mistake. That was a deliberate choice. The story just ends unresolved with no reason given for why the narrator lived. Here's where it gets interesting. Snopes and multiple fact-checking organizations investigated thoroughly and found zero historical documentation of any Soviet experiment matching these parameters. None. But the story was set during the Cold War, framed in the language of declassified government reports and anchored to an era where Soviet secrecy was absolute. Of course, there's no record. That's exactly what they would have done. That pseudo-historical framing is what made the Russian sleep experiment a turning point for creepypasta. It proved that setting fiction inside a closed, plausible historical context dramatically increases how real it feels, and the graphic content pushed the genre's intensity ceiling further than anything before it. But, if you think a fake Soviet experiment is unsettling, wait until you hear about the entity that haunted millions of Minecraft players without ever existing in the game's code. Herobrine. In August 2010, a Minecraft player posted something that would haunt the game's community for over a decade. They claimed that they'd spawned into a brand new single-player world and spotted a figure standing in the fog. Default Steve's skin. Completely white, empty eyes. No name tag. No explanation. And that should have been impossible. This was a solo world. There was no multiplayer. There was nobody else in that game. But here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. When the player tried posting about it on Minecraft forums, every single thread got deleted within minutes. Then they received a private message from a user named Herobrine, containing one word: stop. The community ran with it. Players started documenting supposed Herobrine sightings everywhere, reporting mysterious structures nobody built, random pyramids in the wilderness, tunnels carved into mountains, towers appearing overnight. Theories range from a ghost in the code to the spirit of Notch's dead brother. One problem with that last theory, Minecraft creator Marcus Persson doesn't have a brother. Never did. But here's the part that fascinates me. Despite zero evidence of Herobrine ever appearing in unmodified vanilla Minecraft, dedicated fans spent years trying to find the original world seed from that first screenshot. They analyzed terrain generation, tree positioning, even cloud orientation to reverse engineer the exact seed. That level of forensic commitment to something with literally no proof behind it is honestly impressive. And Mojang's response might be the best part. For years, official Minecraft patch notes included one recurring line: removed Herobrine. There was nothing to remove. They knew it. Everyone knew it. But by officially denying something they'd never confirmed, Iboki, they kept the myth alive better than any creepypasta forum ever could. But if a ghost in Minecraft sounds creepy, wait until you hear about a dead kid trapped inside a Zelda cartridge. Ben drowned. In 2010, a college student named Alex Hall bought a used copy of Majora's Mask from an old man at a yard sale. The cartridge worked, but something was wrong with it. And what happened next basically invented an entire subgenre of horror. The game was corrupted in ways that didn't feel random. Audio degraded into something almost intentional, and there was a save file already on the cartridge belonging to someone named Ben. A boy who, according to the old man, had died. But here's where it gets unsettling. Hall documented everything under the pseudonym Jadisable, and the horror wasn't a monster lurking in the code. It was the code itself. The game seemed aware of him, impossible game states that shouldn't exist. The Elegy of Emptiness statue following him through areas where it had no business appearing. Glitched text that read like messages directed at the player, not the character. That distinction is what made Ben Drowned revolutionary. It weaponized a fear nobody had properly exploited before. Technology behaving wrong. Not broken, not randomly glitchy, deliberately hostile. A game that knows you're playing it and doesn't want you there. Ben Drowned pioneered the entire haunted game subgenre, establishing every convention that dozens of imitators would copy. But Hall went further, evolving the story into a full alternate reality game with a dedicated website and supplementary materials that invited the audience to participate directly. In 2010, that was practically unheard of. And yet, for all its innovation, Ben Drowned is almost quaint compared to what came next. Because the next legend on our list didn't just haunt a game, it haunted the entire internet, and nobody can even agree on where it came from. Jeff the Killer. Jeff the Killer is the creepypasta that became a teenage icon. And if you think about that for more than 5 seconds, it tells you everything about early 2010s internet culture. The character's origin is messier than people realize. A DeviantArt and Newgrounds user named Sasur created the initial concept around 2008, but the version that actually went viral was an anonymously posted creepypasta in 2011. That story depicted a pale, lidless, permanently grinning teenager who'd been set on fire during a street fight, saw his burned face in a mirror, and instead of screaming, fell in love with it. But here's where it gets interesting. Jeff wasn't popular because he was scary. The writing was rough, the plot was thin, and the original story barely held together. He was popular because he represented something. A teenager destroyed by trauma, dehumanized, and then transformed into something powerful. That hit a nerve with younger audiences in a way that Slender Man never did. Jeff became a fan fiction magnet almost overnight, spawning derivative characters like Homicidal Lou and Jane the Killer, proving how generative the core concept was. And his catchphrase, "Go to sleep," became one of the most instantly recognizable phrases in early 2000s internet culture. The character's real legacy isn't horror. It's the fact that thousands of teenagers saw themselves in a disfigured serial killer and thought, yeah, I get it. But if Jeff's appeal was rooted in teenage alienation, the next entry tapped into something even more primal. The fear of what happens when you invite the dark in yourself. The Midnight Game. Every creepypasta up to this point had one thing in common. You read it, you got scared, and you moved on. The Midnight Game changed that entirely because this one came with instructions. The ritual was simple. Write your full name on a piece of paper, place it in front of your wooden door with a lit candle, then knock exactly 22 times before 12:01 a.m. Open the door, blow out the candle, close it. Congratulations, you just invited the Midnight Man into your house. But here's where it gets interesting. Your objective was to wander through your pitch black home with nothing but a lit candle, evading this entity until 3:33 a.m. If your candle went out, you had 10 seconds to relight it. Fail that, and your only option was a circle of salt. Fail both, and the Midnight Man would supposedly manifest as your greatest fear? Light reading. The legend claimed this was an ancient pagan punishment ritual. Sounds authoritative, except nobody has ever found a single documented pagan tradition matching this description. The entire backstory was fabricated to give a forum post the weight of centuries. But the genius wasn't the lore, it was the accessibility. You needed paper, a candle, salt, and a door. That's it. And that turned creepypasta from something you read into something you did. People actually performed this ritual, filmed it, and posted results online, making the legend feel real in a way no written story ever could. If you think inviting something into your home sounds dangerous, the next ritual asks you to leave reality altogether. The elevator game. You've ridden an elevator 1,000 times. You press a button, the doors close, you go up, you go down. It's the most boring piece of infrastructure on Earth. But according to a legend that spread out of South Korea in the early 2000s, there's a specific sequence of buttons that turns that boring metal box into a doorway. The ritual requires a building with at least 10 stories and an elevator that can access all of them. You start on the first floor, go up to 10, back down to 2, up to 6, down to 2 again, then back up to 10. If everything works, the doors open on the 10th floor and you're somewhere else entirely. But here's where it gets unsettling. The alternate dimension you've supposedly entered looks completely normal. Same building, same hallways, same fluorescent lighting. The only difference is that every single person is gone. No crowds, no security guards, no one. The horror isn't a monster chasing you. It's absolute emptiness. Some versions include a woman who boards the elevator at the 5th floor. You're told never to speak to her, never to look at her, never to acknowledge her existence. Nobody explains what happens if you do. But the strangest part of this whole legend isn't the ritual itself. It's the fact that the South Korean government formally acknowledged it. Officials recognize the elevator game as a meaningful cultural phenomenon among Korean youth, which is almost unheard of. Governments don't typically comment on internet ghost stories. This one was different enough that they felt they had to. And that sense of familiar spaces hiding something wrong, it's about to get a lot worse. The backrooms. In 2019, someone on 4chan described a concept so simple it shouldn't have worked. They said if you no-clipped out of reality, a term borrowed from video game glitches where your character falls through the floor of the world, you'd end up in a place called the backrooms. An infinite network of empty rooms, industrial carpet, buzzing fluorescent lights. No windows, no exits, no explanation. Just the suffocating mundanity of a corporate office stretching in every direction forever, populated by things that want to kill you. That's it. That was the entire post. But here's where it gets interesting. That one anonymous thread tapped into something people didn't even have a name for yet. Liminal spaces. Those transitional in-between locations that feel deeply wrong when they're empty. Drained swimming pools at midnight, school hallways during summer, hotel corridors with nobody in them. The backrooms didn't just spawn a horror concept, it spawned an entire photography and art subculture dedicated to capturing that specific existential unease of familiar places suddenly feeling alien. Then, in early 2022, a teenager named Kane Parsons uploaded a found footage short film series to YouTube that turned a text post into cinematic horror. The production quality was absurd for a kid working alone, and the internet noticed. Hollywood noticed too. A24 picked up the rights, and a theatrical backrooms film is scheduled for May 2026. 7 years. That's how long it took to go from an anonymous 4chan post to a major studio release. But if the backrooms made you uneasy about empty spaces, the next entry will make you terrified of the people standing in them. The Mandela Catalog. Everything we've covered in this video, every forum post, every cursed image, every haunted game cartridge, it was all building toward this. The Mandela Catalog was created by Alex Kister, with the first short dropping on June 9th, 2021. And it immediately earned recognition as one of the most genuinely unsettling things ever uploaded to YouTube. The series is set in the fictional Mandela County, Wisconsin, and spans 13 shorts and 6 volumes across 2 acts. But the scope of this thing is what separates it from everything that came before. The mythology centers on entities called alternates, shape-shifting doppelgangers of specific humans, led by a false manifestation of the Archangel Gabriel. These things don't just kill people. They systematically drive the entire population towards suicide through psychological torture. And here's where it gets truly disturbing. The alternates weaponize everyday technology. Televisions, computers, GPS systems. Any screen can become a delivery mechanism for their influence, which means the horror is literally inseparable from the device you're watching the series on, your screen, right now. The series is set across 2 eras, the early 1990s and the late 2000s, using period-accurate aesthetics and analog media degradation to make everything feel like recovered historical documentation. It doesn't feel like fiction. It feels like evidence, and that's the point. That's the whole story of this video. In 2000, Ted the Caver built a website about a hole in the ground that scared people. 21 years later, Alex Kister built a serialized multimedia horror franchise with professional-grade production, layered mythology, and a monster that uses your own technology against you. Creepypasta didn't just survive the internet, it grew up with it. Anonymous forum text became polished, ambitious, genuinely disturbing prestige horror. The line between internet folklore and real entertainment dissolved completely, and it's never coming back. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.